What's up, Venkers?
What's up, Venkers? Wow, he's so excited. He's so excited he jumped me. I usually go first, but we have a gentleman's agreement. We have a gentleman's agreement, but you fucked up the gentleman's agreement.
Usually Matt starts with the hello, Venkers, and I say what's up, Venkers. But come on, dude, I'm pumped up. We have a legend on the pod. Matt, we're done. We are American boys, right? Yeah, we're American boys, and we grew up watching American sports, and then we got into this thing called Formula One, and we're like, where's the Americans? And, Logan Sargent's in there right now, and you know what? He's having a little bit of a tough time. But then we've done our little bit of research, and we heard about this guy named Scott Speed, and I said, that can't be his real fucking name. I said, no, that is his real name, and the more I looked, the more I liked, and now we have the honor of having him on the pod. Scott Speed, welcome to the Red Flags Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this guy, everyone treats Logan Sargent like he's the first person that's ever been in. Well, he's the first American driver that's been in F1 since America's given a shit, I feel like. Would you agree?
I could definitely say there's a big change, pre-Netflix and post-Netflix.
Yes.
Right. Yes. We're the post. We're living in a PN society, a post-Netflix society.
You were kind of in the dark ages. You were in America. Like I'm saying, in the dark ages for America. Like
right.
F1
100%. Oh, 1,000,000%.
Yeah, F1. You were the weird kid. It seems like that was like everybody in America that raced. All the kids that were into race car driving wanted to probably go to NASCAR or IndyCar, and you were this hipster that was like.
With smoking cigarette with a cappuccino, being like Formula One is the way.
Were people looking at you weird?
I don't know. I think that in America, obviously NASCAR is the biggest motor racing here in America. So there's a large group of kids that are in motor racing that grow up, with that path. But for the kids that grow up in karting, Formula One is, I think, for most would be the top because it's the pinnacle of motorsports. But it's one of those things where it's so far out of reach that it almost sounds a little silly to say, I want to go to Formula One if you're an American. The path to get there had obviously been really difficult. And so, in that way, I guess maybe a little bit of the goofy kid that wanted to go that direction. But I think really for anybody that grew up in karts and road racing, it's not that people, I think, didn't aim that direction. It's just that the path to get there was so impossible.
Yeah, I mean, it seems. It's impossible. Seems to this day. I mean, that's what's kind of fascinating about the sport is that it just seems like it's completely impossible to break into, which makes your story so interesting. Because I know that we've looked, read a little bit about you. I know that your dad was super into Formula One, which is kind of how that got planted.
I'm sitting here today because of that. Look, I'm a big believer that we're a product of the environment we grew up in as kids, And that environment for me was from the age that I can literally remember was watching my dad race his go-kart and be a race car driver. And he was successful at it. He was a multi-time national champion. And so naturally as a kid, I think, I think subconsciously I wanted to be like my dad. And, for my dad, the pinnacle of motor racing was Formula One, and his favorite racing driver was Michael Schumacher. So I didn't know at the time, but I think that definitely had a weight on me as far as driving me to say, okay, well, if I really like racing too, I don't want to be like my dad, so that's where I want to go.
And then, so you win all these karting championships, right? And you started late. Why did you start so late? You said you started at 10, which is
racing's expensive.
It's expensive.
Yeah, racing's expensive. At the end of the day, I only started because my dad had a friend whose son was like a year older than me. And he had a go-kart at the track and said, hey, do you think Scott would want to try this thing? Like, we couldn't afford to buy myself a go-kart. And so I got to try this kart. And I only started racing because I did so good my first time in that kart that my dad's buddy was like, hey, he needs to give him this. And he gave us the go-kart. And we used that go-kart and we practiced and practiced and practiced. And then eventually, it was almost like a year later, actually, I ended up winning a national championship. And it was one of those like really super, right place, right time. A lot of things worked out for me to win this one race. This is 1995 IKF Grand Nationals. And after winning that race, then we had sort of the resources to really put the effort in and go, because we had manufacturers giving us carts and engine builders giving us engines, and that really allowed us to kind of grow and to really do what was necessary to become successful in karting.
So you took to it like a fish to water. You were just like, for the first time you got in, you were like, this is the apex. Here's how you hit the corner. Like on
100%.
You just took to it.
And and really, looking back at it, now, I just thought I was naturally talented. And I really hate that thought now, because it had nothing to do with it. The fact is from the age of 3, I was watching racing. I was watching my dad, and I was playing the video games. They weren't great back then. It wasn't like iRacing you have now, but I was playing the Monaco GP on Sega. I was doing all of those things, all those invisible reps that I didn't even realize I was doing. So when I finally got in the kart, I did know what an apex was. I did know all these things from basically this lifetime of this subconscious learning that I was doing as a kid by watching my dad race.
But I think so. And I've heard you talk a little bit about this, as you've gotten older and wiser, and you look back at your years. But at the time, you were like, okay. As Kenny Powers would say, I got to remember, I am the best.
There was a lot. Look, I based a lot of my identity on that.
Yeah,
for sure. That I was just a really naturally talented racer, and I basically spent the large majority of my career just trying to validate that and to try to say, okay, is there how good am I? And I relished at the idea of someone else getting into my exact go-kart and seeing what they could do, or sharing a car, or really testing, what my ability was to drive. And yeah, like I said, that was a huge part of my identity as a kid growing up.
So your whole attitude was at let's say 15, 16, 17, you were like, this is the finished article. Like, this is as big as my dick gets. Like, this is the best that I'm ever going to be. And I want to see how far I can take this. And there's no improvement. There's no growth.
That was me. That was me 100%. It sounds silly. And I mentioned this on the other podcasts I've done. I had zero idea that I could actually get better, and some of that was being, some of that is ego for sure, but really at the core of it is I had a fixed mindset. I thought that, like I said, from a young age, I thought I could just do this, and I was naturally talented, and I had this special gift. I had no idea all the things that I actually had learned. And because of that, because I started out at such a high level, relatively speaking, the things that I learned, I think I picked them up, but I never got them from somewhere else. So I kind of thought that no one could tell me anything that I didn't already know, or that I couldn't figure out on my own. And so that really stopped me from using that as a fuel source as a motivating drive to just getting better.
And you learned so many things through osmosis, it sounds like, that you didn't even realize you learned them.
Well, that's being a kid, right? That's the neuroplasticity of being a child. It's an amazing thing. I'm pissed because, my daughters are 11 and 9, and we're all learning Spanish right now. And the way their brains work, it's like cheating. They just pick everything up so easily, and as you get older, it's a lot harder to create that. So yeah, that's just, I think, product of being a child.
Wow. So the Scott Speed story is really kind of like the Dirk Diggler story. You just had this natural gift, and you just kind of wrote, and you took it really far, and it was this rise and fall, and now here you are. You're older and wiser, and you have this lesson to teach these kids. Feels like.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think I have a clear picture of my why and what I love. And I think looking back at it as a kid, it was already there. I just didn't realize it. I'll give you an example. When I was younger, maybe I was racing for 3 or 4 years. I'm one of the best karters in the country, racing as much as we can. But there was the kart manufacturer that we had was kind of growing, and I got one of my very best friends to become my teammate on this team. His name was Landon Yee. And I was number 41, he was number 40. Our carts, we matched all the stickers perfect, and the ability to help him and make him better brought me more joy than when I would win a race. And that sounds silly to say. And I remember there's this one example where there was this really big race in Iowa. We're from California, and we couldn't afford to go to this race. But Landon was going to go, and I was like, dude, I want to go too. And I basically went to help him, right? And that trip as a kid, now I was probably 13 years old, was maybe like one of the more happy racing weekends that I've had, because he ended up winning in the rain that weekend. And I'm not sure at that time if I had ever actually won a big race like that. Now, granted, we were kids and we ended up getting DQ'd because I taped up some parts on the seat struts that were illegal. You couldn't. They called it like a body modification. I was trying to keep the rain off of the brake, so I taped this thing up. He got DQ'd and his dad was pissed. But it's amazing. I still remember all these details because it was so impactful for me, and I didn't realize at the time that that's really what made me happy. And it took a lifetime and a long journey through racing, and honestly a really fortunate one, because I've had the opportunity to drive so many different cars at such a high level. I effectively have a PhD in driving. And, because of that, I can now take that and fuel what I'd say is a real passion of mine, and that is helping others, advance and progress and explore the things that they're passionate about. And I can use that education in that pursuit.
Well, okay, so you're older and wiser now, but we want to get to when you were young and dumb and have some crazy stories. Because so from what I heard you say that you were like ready to just go to college and kind of maybe like hang up your racing
100%.
Boots. You were just ready to be like, I won some 100%. Karting stuff, but like this is crazy. And then Red Bull did this short. It was kind of like, it was a one-shot thing that Red Bull did, where they went searching for American talent to be a part of this junior program, and you were of the people that was recruited for that and then wound up being at the top of that list. So what was that like? I mean, were you like, okay guys, like I'm ready to go like drink beers in college, and then like you get a phone call and that's like a phone call that completely changed your life?
Yeah, it's funny, like, because I've never drank still to this day. Okay. The party scene was never me, but I needed to make a career. And I didn't have the tools to go put the pieces together necessary to be a professional racing driver. I had no real ability to talk to strangers. I had no ability to sell myself at all. And maybe even worse, I had no idea that I could actually become those things. I was certain that I was just the way I was, and I was super hard-headed. And so I didn't want it bad enough to push into those areas that were uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for me to go to a racetrack and try to talk to team owners and try to sell myself for a seat. And so I just never did. And so when the karting stuff was done, and when opportunities weren't coming in, I'd never picked up the phone call once to call anybody ever about driving a race car or anything. I got a phone call from Danny Sullivan that said, "Hey, we're doing this Red Bull American driver search. Do you want to do it?" And I answered. Right. That's it. And so I got that opportunity. But if it wasn't for that, I was going to college.
Well, it's interesting you bring that. It's like, what's interesting, I'm seeing a parallel in my life, which is that Matt and I both, Matt's a screenwriter, I'm an actor. That's been our main thing, and then we started this podcast as like a side thing that's now becoming more and more part of, like, this is kind of becoming the mainstay.
How cool! How long have you guys been friends?
We've known each other since we were kids. So we grew up together, and then the plan was always like, we're gonna make movies one day. But then Matt's in LA, I'm in New York, and we've had relative success in our careers. Matt sold some scripts and made a movie, and I've been on a bunch of TV shows and all that kind of stuff. But I found that when I was, and I still feel like this to an extent, though I've learned from this podcast, but like if I was ever on a TV show or meeting someone or whatever, and I had to advocate for myself, I would always like, I'd always feel awkward and cringed out and feel like I don't know how to do that. And then now that we have this thing that's like our thing that we've made together, and it's this thing outside of myself, like it's still me on the microphone, but it's this other thing. I'm like, I'm just like with my tits out in Times Square, like, please listen to my podcast. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and all of a sudden this thing is unlocked. When I was younger, I'd be like, well, who knows? But I think in a similar way, I'm finding the connections, but like, I felt like acting always came very easily to me. And then all of a sudden people like gave me lots of opportunities, and I was, I'm a boy doing theater, and I'm, can sing, so I'm the lead in every show. And then I graduate college, and it's time for me to like be a professional and get an agent and advocate for myself and kind of do all that work. And I was
play the game. And
I was like, why am I even doing this? My why was kind of gone as well.
That's a really important question.
Right? It's the same thing. It's like, for me, it was always like talent. Like, I'm talented, I work hard. But then there's this whole political aspect, and then, okay, so you get into this American. Did it feel like the Hunger Games?
Yeah, kind of. It was. So the thing about it is, they got to cherry pick 16 guys with no restraints. It didn't matter how much money they had. Nothing mattered. So they picked 16 of the best, and did they maybe miss a couple? I don't know. Out of 16, maybe there's 10. There was 10. I'd say really good guys. They all got invited. So as far as American motorsports at that time, from the ages of I don't know, I think Paul Edwards was in his 20s. Just call it 23 to 15. They got all the best guys. Now, how do you create an environment there to then rank all those people? Yeah, that was something that we all laughed at. Because anybody who's ever been to a rental or an indoor karting track knows there's always like a good kart or, so that's kind of how it was. They flew us all to Paul Ricard, France, and there was 5 karts. We'll call them karts. They were cars. And I was fortunate that the first 2 that I got into were good ones. And I was able to go sort of top of the board. I was the fastest guy there. And when I had, I think we probably got, if I remember right, we got 3 opportunities. The third one I got into, I'm going down the back straightaway and I'm reading the tack. And I'm like, ooh, this thing's like 200-300 RPM down. I didn't even do a completed lap. I came right into the pits. Danny Sullivan was waiting there. He's like, hey, everything okay? This was like my final shot with the thing. I'm like, hey, Danny, like this thing's like 200 or 300 RPM down. And he literally says verbatim, it's okay, Scott, we've seen enough out of you. And he looks over to Brian Sellers, who's standing there, and he's like, Brian, you can get in.
Oh, that's
and I'm pretty sure Brian heard that conversation, and it's just like you watch the life go out of him.
Oh, my God.
That being said, in all the cars that I ran, more guys were in those things. And like, look, there's a lot of really good racing drivers, and I don't think you can measure necessarily in that way to someone's ability. But like I was one of the fastest guys. So for myself, right, if we take back, like my goal was I always wanted to just measure myself. I'm happy as hell. Not even if I was the best. I thought I'm definitely one of. There's a couple guys that were all really close, but for me that was good enough. Like I answered to myself, hey, I'm one of the best guys in the country. So when they were listing out who was going to be selected, I honestly didn't even care. I was like, I know for me, I'm one of the best American racing drivers in the country, and that was like way beyond my expectations as a kid, that I would actually get that opportunity to prove that to myself. So everything after that was gravy.
Interesting.
So it's interesting that you it felt like your why was almost good enough to take you very far, because you're just trying to prove everything to yourself, but it seemed like you were content to just be there or thereabouts.
It's a gift and a curse. It's a gift and a curse. I can't imagine a life that I'm not happy. I will always find a way to be happy and grateful for what I have, and it's
so you go to the junior. you go to your first junior series, you struggle. You have ulcerative colitis, right?
Yeah.
So
big issue.
while many people ask stupid questions like, do drivers go in their racing suits? Like, you're one of the few drivers that actually might have, right?
Oh yeah. I wore diapers. I'd wear diapers in Europe. Yeah.
It's crazy.
I tell you though. Little fun fact.
Yeah.
The year that everything was super super bad for me, probably like the worst with my colitis, was the year that I won 2 championships over there, which is something I'm not sure another American has yet to do. And that was beating a really competitive group. That was beating the Simon Paginots, the Roman Grosjeans, the Pascal Maldonados. There's 4 guys that eventually made it to Formula One. I had a really successful year over there, and I was wearing diapers. I was probably using the bathroom 50 times a day.
Oh my God.
And so the problem was
in the car.
Right?
In the car.
Funny enough, never in the car.
Okay.
Super weird. Never. But it was always like, before or after. And the thing about Europe is another thing that that it would be is probably maybe surprising to people. Like, to go use the restroom in the gas station, you have to have money. You have to have like 50 pence to put in the change to go use the bathroom. Like, it sucked. Like, it was a problem.
You're over there going.
And those Red Bull contracts were not great, so you were spending half of your salary on toilets. It sounds like.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's just not. Europe's not quite as accessible. Life's not quite as easy. Things are so easy over here in America. Things are it's built so much newer, right? Everything's convenient. Whether that's bathrooms or parking or stores being open on Sunday.
Air
Life is really easy here. Air conditioning, yes.
There's no air conditioning over there.
Water's like a precious I'm in England right now, actually. Water's like a precious fucking resource. You have to ask for it. In America, they just give it to you. I got to ask. You're in GP2. What? Any Nico Rosberg stories?
No, not really, other than he's really good, like, Nico's great. Him, between him and Lewis, those I think are like the best guys from my generation. Easily. It's pretty cool to see that, and I think Nico would have been able to as well, but it's cool to see Lewis still doing so well, because this next generation of kids is so incredible. The Lando Norrises, the Max Verstappens, the Charles Leclercs, like the level of what they're doing is incredible. And a lot of that's based on the environment they had as kids. They grew up with better information, better simulation, more experience, and it's really fun to see those kids do things in cars that is super elite.
Yeah, we were saying that when we watched Drive to, because we're we're total Drive to Survive converters. But we were talking about they've been driving Monza on their PlayStation since they were like 4 years old. So then when they're actually there, they're like, oh yeah, I know. It's like that's exactly what you were talking about earlier. But okay, I'm curious because you were talking about that you always found a way to be happy, and that you didn't necessarily have that just dire grit. I have to be the best, otherwise I'll have no sense of self kind of thing. But then from what we've heard going over to Europe from America, that there's a whole different culture, that it's much more competitive, that because everyone's going for Formula One, and that there's a little bit more of a cutthroat vibe there. Did you find that in your time over there?
It's just more competitive for that style of racing. It would be like someone wanting to play American football and trying to practice in Europe.
Right.
Really. Or some, it's maybe the most similar to soccer, in the sense that, it's not that there's not talent over here. It's just that talent doesn't have the opportunity to compete against the highest level.
Right.
And so naturally it's more difficult to feed that. Like anything, to get better, you need to raise the challenge. And you can just that challenge level in Europe just higher. Everybody in the world that is going for Formula One ends up there and competing against each other, and that just gives that environment to where you're able to push the limits.
So do you think the drivers there are better, or just for that discipline of racing? And like,
I think for that discipline of racing,
right?
But the thing, the interesting thing is if you take it from like the base level now, like in American karting, that's actually becoming quite competitive to the point where there's now kids, you get kids that are 10, 11 that can now go over in Europe in go-karts and compete. That wasn't the case when I was a kid. And I know that because I know for sure I was one of the best go-karters in the country. For sure I know that. And I went over there and my teammate in Toro Rosso was a world karting champion. And the delta in a go-kart was massive. Like he did things in a go-kart. Like we did all the time. We were really great friends. And
Liuzzi?
we would go karting. Yeah, Liuzzi. We'd go karting and what he could do with a go-kart was just incredible. It was really cool to see.
Didn't he beat Schumacher in like his home track or something like that? Like he was a god
in a go-kart. I think go-kart. Yeah, that's not really a fair fight. But all those kids when they start over there, even at the karting level, for my generation, it was already high. So you already have a head start.
So wait, what kind of things does he do in a kart? Because I kind of fashion myself as a preternaturally gifted karter.
Oh yeah?
I've gotten into this late, obviously. I'm a bit, I'm big. I gotta drop some lbs, but like when I get onto you go onto these things, and I'm always like I'm always first or second on whatever list against and now these are against plebes, obviously. But I've gotten into this late in life, and I'm like, I know that people do kart as adults, and there are like you're talking about your dad was he won championships as an adult. So what any secrets?
What's Brian's path?
Yeah, what do I need to? No, just what could he do in a kart that next time I go to the RPM Speedway in Jersey City, I'm gonna all of a sudden I'm gonna break the timing.
I don't know if that's gonna help you. I think
that's like saying, so what Michael Jordan does is he dunks from the free throw line. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Specifically, what he was really great at was using his body to manipulate the kart. Where I was, using your body weight and pressure, pushing on the cart in certain ways to make it do things. That was the big delta.
That's like next level stuff. That's not just like lines and braking in the right places. Yeah, it's just like the last level.
It's specific to carts, moving your like shifting your weight down, all that kind of jazz. Okay,
putting where you're putting pressure.
We got to ask. So obviously, Red Bull, the junior program, is in the news a lot for being a bit of a shit show. And it seems like it was a kind of a shit show when you were, especially the American wing of it. Now, what's your estimation of the junior program right now? Because it's like they have two teams. They have like a pipeline of guys. And then they bring in, they bring in Checo, they're dumping guys. Then they're bringing Daniel Ricciardo back and putting a 34-year-old in the junior program. I mean, what do you think's going on over there? What's your assessment?
I don't know. I don't have any knowledge, honestly, what's going on now. And the thing about being over there in that world is I have real potent memories of being there and then reading what the news or what anyone thought was going on, and it being so wildly off base and inaccurate that not being over there now, I can't comment. I have no idea. I do know this. I know that even if that system's not perfect, what they are doing is they're creating an environment for those kids to put work in. And the other thing is they're giving opportunity. And it might not be 100% the opportunities that I came in with. Like I came in a very small window of opportunity for me where I didn't have to bring any money to do this or sponsorship or relationships to be on the junior team. And that wasn't a very big window. And I snuck in there. And because of that timing and because of all the opportunities Red Bull gave me, even if they weren't perfect, I got to become a professional racing driver.
Yeah.
So, man, I hate just because I know how much they've influenced my life and the opportunities they've gave me. I hate when people want to point out anything negative with what they're doing over there because they're doing something. And even if it's not perfect, the intentions are good, and they're achieving that. They're giving kids opportunities to pursue these dreams.
Yeah, I mean, even after time was over, they supported your drives in NASCAR, and they gave you a lifeline even after that. I feel like now we gotta know what was Helmut Marko. What was we gotta
Marko. The thing about Helmut, and I loved him, and honestly, I think if it wasn't for Helmut Marko, I wouldn't be here, because I wasn't the polished kid that was kissing everybody's butt at the runoff, or could speak well, or could bring any sponsors. Marko didn't care about anything other than going fast, and those aligned with me. That was great. That's all I care about too. Like, I want to be the best racing driver, and that's all I cared about. That's all I put my focus on. I didn't care about anything else, and that in some ways, like, he that was okay for him. And if I remember right, his thought was, I can teach someone how to do all these things. I can't necessarily teach someone how to drive fast. And so the thing about Marko is he even if he's maybe a little stubborn, he has so much information, and he works so hard at it. When you come at him, you better be educated. You better know what you're talking about, because he has a lot. And every time I'd go visit him in Graz for some kind of performance review or something, he'd pull out his huge binder, and he'd have every practice result that I've done that year, every sector time, and he would just know. And I think, when you come with that much passion that he has, and that much knowledge, if you're going to come at him, you better come correct.
Right. Dude, so you had nothing but respect for him, just the passion that he had.
Yeah,
and he
definitely.
was really, and even I'm confused. You said you didn't think you could be better. When he's coming at you with telemetry and sector times and all that stuff, you're like, well, I'm the finished product at that point?
Oh, yeah. No, so for me, that was easy for me. It's the car. And there was many times in my career, where all we had to do was switch the car. And to this day, I can't think of one time that any human has ever got into my car and gone faster than me. Hadn't happened. So I didn't keep working on it. To me, everything was about the car. This really got embedded in me in 2003 when I first went over to Europe, because my first year was a train wreck. I finished in the top 10 in British Formula 3 maybe twice. We were terrible, and I was 100% convinced that these European guys are just way better than us, and I am not good enough to do it over here. And that kind of fits in line with the story I had told myself about how good the European open wheel guys were. But at the very end of the year, and this is why I say Helmut was so responsible for me being where I am, is he said, no, I've seen something with him at the driver search. I'm not sure about this. I want you guys to bring the guy that won the championship the year before. I want him to come out and test these two cars with Scott and his teammate, because my teammate had actually won a race. His name was Will Davidson. He had won a race. He was doing reasonably well, and we went to a test at Snetterton. And me and Will got to test the car for like 2 sessions, like 2 little 5-lap runs to kind of put down a base time. And then the champion, Robbie Kerr was his name, he was going to get in the cars and test them. And when Robbie got in the cars, he did my teammate's car first. And my teammate was at the time like 4/10 quicker than me in practice, which was kind of par for the course. He had done like a 102.1. I was like a 102.5. I'm pretty sure those times are right too. And Robbie gets in his car and he goes 2/10 quicker than my teammate in his own car. And now I'm looking at like 6/10 of time around a 1-minute track. I'm like, holy crap. Like, how can I be this bad? And I remember, I know exactly where I was standing. I remember the stopwatch I was holding. Robbie gets in my car. He runs out there. He runs 102.6. I think he ended up finally getting down to the time I ran after like 2 or 3 sessions. And the impact that had on me psychologically was just it just implanted so heavy that anytime something went wrong, I was like, well, it has to be the car. I mean, it's not me, and someone else getting this thing. And then that
was actually a bad thing that happened to you.
Well, it was good because I got another chance, and then I got to go the next year and race Formula Renault, where I won 2 championships, and then eventually to GP2. But it was bad in the sense that it ingrained to me this idea that the car is everything.
Wow. So when he says Liuzzi's braking here, you're like, well, his brakes must be better, or
no. See, that's all. That's detail. That's driving. Like I can see all that live. Like you're not. I'm not arguing. I'm not lying about that to myself. Like I know that in Formula One we have the exact same cars. I know his driving style. I can see all that data, and some things I could match, some things I could do better, and some things I couldn't do better. But I knew very specifically what those were, right? And that's like the last like little bit. The big thing was going to work on myself and saying, okay, what can I do to be better today than I was yesterday? Didn't even try.
Well, it's an interesting thing because I think we feel like that watching it because sometimes there's great drivers and. Unlike if you're playing basketball or if you're in other sports, like it is dependent on the machinery. Max Verstappen, if he gets into a Williams, isn't winning a single race or getting into the top 5 of any race this year, probably, despite the fact that we understand and we know that he's a great driver. So it is. I feel like that's a difficult balance to tightrope to walk, which is one of wanting to feel confident. Not wanting to put too much blame on yourself. Sometimes we a lot of what we do on the pod is we analyze the psychology of Matt's a writer, I'm an actor. Like we get into the heads of these drivers, and sometimes it feels like Charles Leclerc can be so hard on himself in a way that's like but you didn't even mess that up, or when he's trying to dig himself out of a hole that it kind of seems like his team put him in, and then he's taking on too much blame.
He overcompensates. Or that's the thing with Checo right now, right? Is like Checo's like he finds himself like he's got to make up for a mistake, and then he makes an even bigger mistake.
Oh, he'll compounding mistakes deal. Seen that right?
Yeah, it feels like our analysis of what's kind of going on there was that like he's run up against Max, and Max is obviously Max, and he's trying to kind of like will himself into this other stage, and then he's making all these errors and actually kind of like it's falling down a bit of a hill.
You know what I recently read is that he's been offered a different, like they're like, this setup will be better for you, but it's a little bit slower, and he goes, no, I need the same setup as Max. Like, and it's just like he can't just accept that he just can't do Max's setup. He just wants everything the same as Max. He wants the same exact setup, and that's what's been so hard for him is that he wants that really pointy, he wants whatever's fastest, just like Max, but he can't handle that setup, and it's just that's ego, right? Or is that just as a race car driver? If you make it to Formula One, is it just physically impossible to admit that you're slower than somebody else? Is that just?
No, I don't know about that. I think that, look, like you said, Formula One is unique in motor racing in the sense that every one of those cars is different. So then you're really in different cars. Right. So how that impacted me personally was, well, okay, as long as I'm able to do what Tonio's doing in the car, well then there's nothing else to do. I'm just showing up every race weekend, trying my hardest, obviously, when I'm there, but what can I do? Where can I put energy and effort into? And that's for me what sent me the other direction away from Formula One, because to me it was just boring. Like I remember after I got in the big altercation with Franz, bless his heart, he's got a tough job. He's got a really tough job trying to help these young kids, on their journey as they enter Formula One. But when I left that, I had other opportunities with other F1 teams, and I didn't even think about it. Like I just wanted to run away. I was like, geez, this is like I in my mind imagined what it would be like to, instead of be running like 11th or 12th, be running 3rd or 4th. And for me, couldn't care less. Like I didn't, like my drive was about proving to myself, how good I was. And when, like, to me, I could never answer that because I knew everybody's car is different. Like that's not what drives you. That's not what is a healthy way to, motivate you. And what is really cool is when you see guys like, Michael Schumacher and the mindset that he had, which to be that good and to reach that level, like he's easily beating his teammates. He's in the best car, but he's still pushing himself and getting better every single day. Like that's the right mindset. That's something that that you should inspire to be like. And I didn't have that. To me, like I said, I didn't think I can get any better. And when you can't even compare yourself anymore because all the cars are different, then what are we doing?
Interesting. So did you kind of had that kind of attitude? Did that build up and cause that confrontation you have with Franz Tost? Because he seems like a pretty
mellow.
I just didn't care.
Mannered guy, and then then you guys have a physical altercation. Like, were you just kind of into like, oh, shut up, Franz? Like, come on, like it's stupid.
Yeah, walk us through how you made this tiny man.
My last race was so career. It was so good. So the thing is it had been boiling for a while, right? I think there was pressure coming politically. From Ferrari to bring a different guy in, and Franz was in a really difficult position. And so there was this stuff building in the background, and as it's going, I am like probably less and less happy in general with how things were. And we go to the Nürburgring. Now our car was crazy fast in the rain. Earlier that year, I remember specifically in Monaco in free practice 1, I spent time on the top of the leaderboard with that thing. And then it dried up after free practice 1 and things went back to reality. But for whatever reason, our car was super fast in the wet. And so it was dry through the Nürburgring, through practice and qualifying. Antonio and I qualified, I think, like 16th and 17th or something. Like we were not really good. And it started downpouring right on the grid. And I had the most fun first lap of my life because our car was really good and we were just driving around people. And I think we entered the pit lane like 11th and 12th, or maybe even 10th and 11th. But in the last chicane, I'd gotten by Tonio, so I came in front of Tonio in the pits. And so they were expecting Tonio, and so when I stopped, they started putting his tires on, and they're like, "Oh shoot, this is Scott." Had to take the tires back off. So I don't know, I was there for 30 seconds or something. It took a while.
Jesus.
Like the race at that point was kind of over. Put on rains. Now it's torrential rain at this point, right? Full wets going around, a bit ways back, but we're still like going to be probably pretty fast. And we go down into the first corner, and the first corner at the Nürburgring is really downhill. And I go in there and I brake somewhere super early. Like, I'm pretty conservative. I don't normally crash on my own. And I hit the brakes, and the thing doesn't even come close to stopping. I think I hit the gravel trap still going about like $150 because it's just hydroplaned down the hill.
Yeah.
And I'm hitting the gravel trap, and there's 2 other cars sitting there, and then Jenson Button comes sliding in, and then Lewis Hamilton comes sliding in. It's like everybody's crashing.
Everyone went off.
And I'm like, and I was at this point where I was like, I'm actually kind of still pretty pumped. Like I had made some legit passes on the first lap. I remember driving around the outside of Ralph Schumacher in like turn 9. It was just a really cool experience that we were fast for once, and that was really fun. It didn't end up the way it could have, but whatever. It didn't really bother me for some reason. And I came in and I was talking with my engineer, John, and I was like, wow, how crazy was that? And I was actually kind of smiling. And Franz is like a level 10 pissed. And we were just on such a different like spectrum of emotion that he was super pissed, and he said, what happened? Or I think I probably said, like, everybody's just hydroplaning off the track. He's like, no, not everybody, just the wankers. And I looked over there and I was like, yeah, you're right, Franz. Lewis, Jensen, bunch of wankers out there. You got it, buddy. And I think I even told him to F off, which was stupid. And I turned around and just walked away. But like I said, like that's something that accumulated. I wasn't happy there. That I didn't have the mindset needed to be successful over there where I could work on myself without getting to see a result. Because if I worked harder that week and got better, even if I did get a little better, there's no way for me to really see it. I couldn't quantify it because if we ran 12th or 10th, mostly had to do with whether we got a new piece of wing on the car or something.
Right.
And so it wasn't really measurable for me. And that's just a product of not having any kind of training or help psychologically to develop any of those mental models to be able to really be successful.
Well, it's interesting because it speaks to the mindset that you have, which I think is there's a kind of there's a healthiness to that. The feeling of, I'm not going to get so hung up on stuff that's like out of my control, and all I can do is what's in my control, or a feeling of like, I'm not going to be, like I have to proving something to yourself, and kind of holding your opinion to an audience of one. There's a healthiness to that, but I could see how in that type of environment, you smiling and laughing after a result like this because you were excited because earlier in the race you had done well. But it speaks to like, that you're a healthy. I could, of course, he'd see that and interpret that as that this kid doesn't give a shit. But like, you just had a different, hierarchy of what was important to you at the time.
Yeah, and the thing is ego is a hell of a drug, and it'll hide a lot of stuff from you. Like I was the last person that was ever going to look at anything I could do better.
Right.
And that's a shame. Just because obviously now being older and having gone down this route and gone down the area of growth and having a true growth mindset and really bettering myself, it's a shame because God, like, life is so cool, and we live in a world right now where there's so much information out there for you to absorb and to learn from. It's just what an amazing time to be alive. And
when did this ego death occur? Like, how did this happen? When did you shed the Kenny Powers of attitude?
Well, when I came back to do NASCAR, I was competing in the most competitive motor racing in the world, and it was so similar. It's almost comical how similar my experience was to Days of Thunder with Cole Trickle without the eventual success, because I came in and I could drive the cars really fast. My very first ever test in a cup car around Charlotte, I think I was second quickest. But what I had no idea to do at all was race on an oval. And I spent, the only real short window of opportunity I had there with a good team, never even looking at a piece of video or anything that I could have done better. And not too much later, when I did realize that, I guess I realized, well, shoot, like I can't blame this one on the car. Like, obviously, these guys are a lot better at this than I am, which was okay. I didn't grow up doing it. That was an easy excuse for me to call out for myself. But to not get better and to put everything into getting better, that was the ego saying, no, man, you can't, dude, you're good. You don't need to be putting in this work. You don't need to be doing that. And it really limited me from ever really looking at what I could have done better.
Interesting. We talked to Joseph Newgarden after he won the Indy 5, and it was interesting talking to him because I think he's someone who kind of has almost too much of the, like, I can always get better and there's always something I can do, and that, that kind of thing. And what he said before the Indy 500 this year was that, like, normally he's poring over, every piece of, tape and analytics and data that he can. And this year, and he never won the Indy 5. And then this year he was like, you know what? I've done enough work. I'm just going to, just trust that when the time comes, I'll know what to do. And he was like, he credited that to, part of the thing that making the difference this year, because it's all about balance, because there's probably people who constantly feel like I could always do better. And what they need is a little bit more of the, I'm the shit, and I'm good. And actually it was the fucking car this time. It's about finding that balance.
So fun. It's so fun to learn that part of the psychology and what's really happening. That's just expectation. We'd all been there. I was there myself. Sometimes the harder I tried, the worse I did. There's a reason I ended up in the state, the thinking model in the state I was in is because that's what ended up working for me.
Right.
But really that came down to just, the more and more effort I put in, the harder I worked, well, then my expectations went up. And then you don't reach that expectation, then now you're spiraling, now you're trying to do things.
Do you think it's a defense mechanism? Because God, who's that great Australian tennis player, Brian?
Kyrgios.
he's like one of those guys who's like, they call him the most naturally talented person, the most naturally talented tennis player, and he never practices.
He doesn't have a coach.
He doesn't have a coach, and everyone talks about how talented he is, and think about how much he could achieve if he just, buckled down. And it's almost so when he makes it to the quarterfinals or whatever, or the semis, and loses, everyone goes, "Oh my God, what an achievement for a guy who doesn't practice," right? Do you think that there was a bit of a defense mechanism there?
That's not. I mean, yeah, I can relate to that a lot. I always had the excuse that I'd never tried because it was a really easy one. Well, if you don't try and you fail, well then okay. Well, I probably could have. You can always tell yourself, well, I could have done that if I would have tried.
Right.
So sure,
you made it pretty far without fucking trying.
Yeah, and it's not. I can't like. And it's not to
There's so
say
many
that
people who have tried really hard to get to Formula One.
I can't say it's not even that too, because I did try.
Right. Yeah.
It's just that the idea of putting in work was really difficult for me to do that without having such a high expectation, or to be in a place where I didn't perform good. I couldn't match those. I couldn't increase my work level and the energy that I put into it without screwing up how I performed, because I didn't have a model to deal with that.
And it's also probably the work that you don't want to do, right? It's like there's probably work that you enjoy doing, but so much of it is like you got to do the work that you don't want to do. Yuki Tsunoda is talking about how he hates, it's like he's not physically fit enough to be in Formula One, and he's like bitching and moaning as he has to work out now to be in. And now he's got a six-pack, but he's like not happy about it.
Well, he said Franz was in better shape than he was. Now, what's interesting, I guess, so
yeah, Franz is in better shape because you were like, you said what you said earlier. I got to go back to this. You said, I told him to F off and I walked away. But then what we've heard is that there was a physical altercation. And
he just grabbed me by my shirt a little bit.
Okay.
Nothing crazy. No.
Okay.
He grabbed me by the collar and was like, I antagonized the hell out of him.
Wait, so
bless his heart. Like he has to deal with a lot.
You're surprised he didn't do it sooner. So I guess is the key to just learn how to like work as hard as you can, but not set your expectations, is to keep the expectations like whatever happens, have that blasé attitude, right? Whatever happens. Work as hard as you can. Like, if you could just get to the point where you can work as hard as you can and accept whatever comes. That seems like the key, and fall in love with the process.
It's so complex. I love the idea of falling in love with the process, and I love the idea of keeping expectations in check. And I think having an awareness of the things you can control, and putting energy into those things that you control, they're going to have the biggest influence on the outcomes that you want.
Yeah.
I think you figure out what those things are, and then you have the discipline to put the energy there, and that's a pretty healthy way to progress.
Yeah, it's always rough, right? When you go to a guy's house and he's got the ping pong table, and then you beat him in ping pong, and it's like, dude, you have a table? Like, it's much better to be the guy who doesn't have the table and loses. You're like, well, I don't have the table. I don't like.
Right. Well, I think that's a thing that everyone experiences in everyday life. That's a applicable thing. It's certainly applicable for us. It's like sometimes we've been doing this for a few years now. It's like sometimes you work really hard on a video, like especially in the early days when we were doing everything ourselves. It's like you pour over this video and you're like, this is gonna murder, and then it gets like no results, and you're like, what the fuck? Like it's hard to just not take. It's so easy in life, especially if you're doing something, that you care about. But you want to do something you care about. But then the other thing is that you care about it. So then if it doesn't go well, then all of a sudden it's like your self-worth feels like it's on the chopping block.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
I'm gonna name drop. I always name drop the same person because I know like 3 celebrities.
Rob Reiner.
Rob Reiner. I did a movie with him, but he told this great story about Warren Beatty. He introduced his kids to Warren Beatty, right? And he said he goes, Warren, kids, Warren, right? And he goes, he said, the kid said, nice to meet you. Warren said, nice to meet you, kids. Kids, nice to meet you, Warren. And then Warren Beatty shuffles off, right? And then the kids, and Rob goes, kids, you know who that was? That was Warren Beatty. And the kids were like, who the fuck is Warren Beatty? And he was like, Warren Beatty was bigger than DiCaprio, bigger than Cruise. He was starred in movies. He directed movies. He was the Cat's Pajamas. And now he's just the guy who fucked up the Oscars, with La La Land and Moonlight or whatever the fuck, right? So, and that was a great reminder for him that like fame, glory, all the results, like this guy Warren Beatty was, everything that you'd want to be in his given profession, and like nobody gives a shit anymore about Warren Beatty.
Oh, that's so interesting, right? Because it's not, and it's really hard to, when it comes to like how you're valuing yourself, as you get I lived this, right? As you become famous or you elevate your station in life, then you get things. You get perks, and it's really easy to think that those are yours and those are from you, but really those are the position you hold. And when you leave that position,
right,
those perks leave too. But that's not you. Yeah. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, we're all going to we're all end up in the same place. And I think it's easy as you're going through that, especially in the field that you guys are in where that popularity and that exposure is so big, to think that those things that come with that are who you are, but ultimately it's just the position and the station you're holding at the time.
No, but the lesson I think is to like what you can't take away from people who have achieved things is if they've enjoyed the process, if they've enjoyed the work, or what they've gotten out of the work that they've done.
Well, if you do it all for the results, if you're too result oriented, there's it's what we're all gonna die. It's like that's where sometimes the glory sentiment is an interesting one. It feels like a flawed one in a way to me, because there's something that kind of feels unhealthy about that the feeling of it has to like live on. It has to be this thing, because there's a level where you might do everything you can to get better and to do all these things and to achieve and to achieve and to achieve and to achieve. But you're running from something as well. Sometimes people work so hard because they're running from something as well. You can avoid work to run from something, and you can be an underachiever and you can be an overachiever as a way of avoidance. Those are both like very real, coping mechanisms.
Sounds like you managed to do both, yeah. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, look, it's fascinating. I love, I'm relatively new to the study of psychology, and I can say that it's so fascinating what the stories are that we tell each other, ourselves, and what shapes us as humans, and why we do what we do. It's infinitely fascinating to me, and I think that the biggest takeaway I've had is, I kind of think as a kid, I always thought that there was like a right or a wrong way, and it never occurred to me that someone could have a different perspective. There's just only right or wrong. And as I became older and I realized that, look, it's all a fugazi. It's a fugazi. Like everything we're seeing is just from our perspective, from our lifetime of experiences. And the way I see something is going to be different than you and you and you. And when you stop trying to like decide what the right way or wrong way is, and you just are comfortable with, look, that's how I see it, but it's cool if you see it a different way. And gosh, there's so much beauty in that I found that I now search out people that think very differently than me, or have lived a much different life than me, because I think it's just so fascinating, all of these beautiful points of view you can have, by, let's say, if you watch a race, and you and your buddies are fans of two different people and they crash. Well, that was that guy's fault. No, it was his fault. Yeah, or like you play, I see it, my girls play soccer, and if you've ever been to like a kid's soccer match, the sidelines of the parents is a pretty rowdy place.
Right.
And the ref will make a call, and half the sideline is screaming "yay," and the other half the sideline is yelling at the referee. And I think that I at the moment just really love that diversity of perspective from people.
Yeah. Speaking of an interesting perspective, we know that you raced for Gunther Steiner's NASCAR team, didn't you?
Yeah, Gunther Steiner was running the Red Bull NASCAR team when I came over there, and I had been friends with Gunther before. Gunther was the technical director at Jaguar when Red Bull had first bought the team. So, when I was 2004, I don't know, I was maybe 20 racing Formula Renault. I got to sit in that car at one of the races, and Gunther was like the guy showing us all around. He was kind of in charge of running that team, so I've known him for a really long time.
And he gotta give me a Gunther.
If you think of it, when you think back at that time, like, is there a specific? Might be maybe a story or just like a visual or something. Like what is when you think, if you like snapshot, like, this is what I think of Gunther Steiner from that time in my life, like, what immediately comes to mind?
Man, Gunther, I don't know. I think Gunther is super authentic. He's a really authentic human, and for me, Gunther's always been a bit of a mentor. He lives literally 2 miles up the street, and if ever I'm in a spot where I need like some guidance, or I really want a different perspective, like, he's been a great friend.
Oh wow!
I love the fact that he's a little bit famous now, because like, even here in Mooresville, this is NASCAR USA. Nobody knew what Formula One was when I moved here. Zero, which was kind of fun because it's almost like I got to start over.
Right.
But now, like, he'll even go to the local restaurants here and people will recognize him, and it's adorable. I love it. I'm like, hey,
you must have never known, like, this guy showing me the car at Jaguar is going to be a global superstar at some point.
It's pretty funny how this has all worked out, for sure. I mean, look, the Netflix show has changed fundamentally a lot. And it's really cool that it is elevating motor racing across the board, whether that's IndyCar or NASCAR. I'm a big believer, like, all, high tide lifts all ships.
Yeah.
These anything that's helping motor racing, something that, I obviously have a passion for. I think that's great for everybody. So it's been cool to watch that happen.
I kind of feel that way about literally this podcast, because like, we come from a Hollywood world, and I feel like I'm always trying to, like, it was like this feeling of trying to impress my other actor, writer, director friends about like what thing I'm doing. And then I went into this Formula One world, and now we're having all this success in this thing that like none of my friends know anything about. Mm-hmm. But then they like they're like, oh shit, like, what the fuck? Like, your clips get millions of views. Like, and I love that. I like, it feels like I'm in the pressure of the situation has been taken off completely, and it's like, I feel like I'm in like a playground of like, with none of my baggage. Dude,
it makes sense, though. It totally makes sense for you guys. Look, you guys seem super authentic, and you're just curious about something that you're not experts in, and you get to share that journey. You get to talk. You get to. But I think that it's so interesting, because you guys have a point of view that I wouldn't think of. I see racing way differently than you guys do, right? But if you want to connect with someone, that doesn't have that lifetime of experience in it, like, you guys are thinking of those questions. You guys are thinking of, those things that you're curious about that are going to be similar to what most people who are getting in the sport think.
Scott, you know what I'm really curious about? I have to ask you this.
Yeah.
We gotta ask you about the iRacing.
Oh, my band! Yeah! Oh my goodness! This is great.
I want to know what your mental map was like in that fucking situation. A YouTuber looked at, people were saying, Scott's a hazard on the track, and then they looked, they said, his stats he's a very clean driver. He only was averaging 4 points a race, which 4 points a race is very clean. because you get 1 point for driving off the track, like 2 points for this. And it was like 4 points a race is you get 4 points for hitting somebody. So if you're under 4 points a race, that means. And then there was this 2-day stretch where Scott averaged 13 points. And they were like, I don't know. And the guy was like, I don't know if Scott got off on the wrong side of the bed or what was going on in his personal life. But so for those of you guys who don't know, Scott was banned from iRacing, and he was he was a fucking brand ambassador for iRacing. So he had a financial incentive for this not to happen. Please, you gotta tell me.
I wouldn't say a financial incentive, but I've known everybody at iRacing for a long time. They're all amazing humans. I couldn't believe that someone. I know what video you're talking about. I cannot believe someone made something like put the energy to do that. That's pretty incredible.
Someone made an amazing. You know, Josh Revel. He did like a whole retrospective on your career. Did you know that?
Oh yeah, there's like a 20-minute that's included in there. It's like a 20-minute kind of talking about your career. It's fantastic. Shout out to Josh Revel.
Here's the deal. You can imagine. I was definitely not taking it very seriously. The thing is, I was waiting to go do a race, and I entered in this race in a car and track I'd never really driven in, just for funsies. Actually, I was trying to collect safety rating for something that was coming up, so I was literally just trying to do laps. Okay, and this guy,
amazing. Hey, that's the objective. That's the goal.
Yes, I don't remember if I was trying to collect iRacing. Like, I think what was going on is at the time some of my friends were racing these endurance races, and you needed like a high I rating, and I never was really on there, so I had to like just do races to get leveled up, so to speak. And so I was just kind of entering these races to collect I ratings, so when we would race, I could be in the same tier as them. I think we're doing like some endurance races. And so I'm running around, I'm doing like Mazda races, and in between them, I'm like, I'm going to do this little Porsche race at Nürburgring. And I get in there, and we're in like a little practice session. One of these guys was really fast. And we go and we do the qualifying, but he like screws it up and he qualifies like behind me somehow. I was on pole for some reason. I think I just made a clean lap. And so we're racing. This guy's way faster than me. And I'm racing a little bit, and I'm driving around leading, and he hasn't been able to pass me yet. And then eventually he like goes to pass me, and he kind of like side swipes me. iRacing is hard because you don't have perfect perspective of like where the cars are. So like stupid stuff, crashes happen all the time. And this guy kind of like misjudged where I was and crashed me. And so I was like, I lost all, like, I'm like, Jesus, this was such a waste of time. I felt like an idiot. I shouldn't even have been in there doing it, And so I'm like, I left the pits. I was like, well, he's not going to win this race. And I leave the pits. And so I leave the pits, and I go to try to crash him, and I miss him big time. And then I think I go and try to crash him again. I miss him again. And I eventually crash him. Like, I finished the job. But I like went back to the pits. I can't think actually another time I've actually done that either. But what made this a problem is he was streaming, and then it became this deal where because he was streaming live, he was talking about it, and then he shared it with his friends, and then next thing you know, like literally the next morning, my buddy sends me a picture of his iPhone, and the latest news story is former F1 driver goes berserk on iRacing. Like, oh god, that's not good. Like, oh wait, we can't be showing up here. Like, what is iRacing? Why does anybody care? Like, really? And it was like this big deal, and that made it really clear at that moment just how important gaming is and streaming, and something that I had no idea like people were really doing at the time.
Oh my god! Wait, so you were pissed that he fucked up your safety rating when he hit you?
Well, he crashed me. It wasn't even really on purpose, but like he crashed me, from a mistake that he did, and so
an eye for an eye, and an eye for an eye, baby,
Yeah, I mean, you wrecked me.
Yeah.
Like,
wait, so did you see what Max did?
Yeah, that's just how Max just did this. So Max was doing
but
this.
But the thing is, like, I imagine, look, there's other instances that there's there's multiple instances of us going on there and doing things, like that, and everybody wants to put it under the microscope and be like, oh my gosh. But at the end of the day, like, dude, we're just normal. I mean, we have the same reactions as everybody else on there.
No, that's why we love it. We love it because it feels like when I play video games with my friends, and I'm like, okay, well, you're not gonna fucking win this race, and I'm gonna do everything I can to take you out. I mean, Max did this during a charity event. There was a charity iRacing thing, and this guy who is known for being a dirty iRacer, and he took out Max, and then Max just cut through the chicane and just fucking torpedoed him and took them both off. And it was beautiful. The press can do what, people can be like, well, they can turn that into whatever. For us, for guys like us, it's like, oh, what we love about a thing like that is that it feels so relatable. It feels like, oh, that's what I would do if I was in that position. So they're mere mortals just like me.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, I feel like because now you're doing more mentorship stuff, right? So can you talk to us about what you're up to now in terms of in all that?
Yeah, I'm still with Subaru and Red Bull. Rallycross here in America is in kind of a weird place because it's gone all electric, and Subaru doesn't really sell a performance electric vehicle right now, so it doesn't really make sense to go there. Obviously for the last 7 years I've done rallycross. I finally actually got to do something in racing that was cool. I have 3 X Games gold medals. Yeah, which are, I think, pretty much the only trophies I actually have in my house because they're actually cool. Like, I've never thought racing was cool. Those, for some reason, I think those are just
X
really
Games
cool.
Are cool.
X Games,
yeah,
are cool.
yeah.
I watched that. I watched your last win. That was insane. Rallycross is insane. It looks like it's like the closest thing to if an action movie was a sport.
Yeah. It's super fun. The cars, what's fun for me is, how to drive those cars. What you're physically doing in them are so much different to really anything else that I had driven. One of the cool things about, coming to do NASCAR was understanding and learning that, well, there's a completely different way to drive a race car. And these guys do that really, really, really well. And to try to learn that eventually, when I open myself up to that, to do that process, I've become, infatuated with, growing myself and growing, my knowledge and skill set behind the wheel of a car. I love that pursuit way more than winning some trophy. I just love the pursuit of learning. Wow. So if I do this in the car, that's how you have to make this go fast. This is very different for me. I have to think about this way differently, whether that's a stock car or a rallycross car or a sprint car. All these sort of vehicles require their own way to drive them fast. I've been fortunate enough to have mostly been brave enough to leave a safe space for me, which was open wheeling and road course racing. It would have been very easy to go to IndyCar or sports car racing or something that I already have that skill set for. It was, if anything, I'm thankful that I made a call to do something wildly different, even though I thought that I was just going to be really good at it. As it turned out, I wasn't, and I had to learn it. But that process really changed a lot of my future because I realized how much I enjoyed that growth. So rallycross was the same thing. I went in and I had a huge learning curve. I had to learn a lot about it. But through that process and learning, I guess I had an appreciation for more of the art of driving. And so when COVID happened, and really I also at the time I'd broken my back in 2019 and I wasn't racing anymore. I had the opportunity to start working with my father and my brother's go-karting team and helping them out. And I realized that passion I have for helping other people. And it just so happens at the time, one of my best friends, his name's Josh Wise, he had started, when his career had kind of finished in the stock car racing world, he had started a company that was going to figure out how to help racing car drivers drive better and perform better because there's not one out there. I'd been in Formula One with the best physios and sports psychologists. I've done all these things, but no one was ever really able to help me drive better. If I didn't figure that out on my own with my engineer and looking at data myself, no one was there to tell me or help me do that better. And it seems kind of silly that a sport this big didn't have that, especially in America here. And so Josh had kind of had that same discovery and started doing that as a job. When he quit driving, he's like, I'm going to start helping racing drivers. And then he quickly realized that to do that well, he's going to need to learn psychology. He's going to need to study communication. And he ended up, I'm super pumped for him, so proud of him, because last year he finished his degree in psychology. And for the last 5 years, he's had this company and we've grown it. I started, I partnered up with him two years ago now. And we work with, high level motor racing athletes and young kids and development kids. And that world that we have there is a really, really happy place for me, where I can help, I can influence other people, I can grow myself, I can get better at what I'm doing, and everything is now in a place now for me that I'm super comfortable and sort of just really authentically happy.
Mm-hmm. And so talk to me about how you work with these kids. I mean, obviously these are young people in a very competitive, high pressure environment. How do you try to
talk to a young
pressure?
Scott Speed?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a big scope, right? There's a big range. We work with, some of the best racing drivers in the country in NASCAR, and we also work with kids that are 13, 14 years old. So, I mean, it's a huge margin of experience and ability level with the people we work with. But ultimately, it's all about the human. And every single person, it's kind of like a different race car. They all need something else, and the challenge is I know how to I in most cases know how to do something or how to drive, and in some cases, some of these guys, they're the best racing drivers in the country. Like, I'm not going to tell them really how to drive. But in all these different cases, you have to figure out a way to where you can either create an environment for them or communicate in a way for them where they can explore and get curious and grow and start moving in a positive direction.
Here's an interesting question. How do you think this Scott Speed would have talked to young Scott Speed? How would you have approached him? Do you think you would, or you would have been?
Oh,
like,
understanding. Understanding. I think that at the end of the day, people want to be understood. I would ask questions. You know what I mean? First and foremost. I think this Scott Speed would have probably asked that Scott Speed first, like, what do you want? Like, where are you going? Like, what is why are you doing it, and what is it that you want to do? And really have that more pointed instead of sort of just going wherever opportunities had taken me, and having more accountability and more intention on what I was doing.
Being in the driver's seat of your own life. Whoa.
Yeah, more so. Yeah, sure.
But truly, I say that to people all the time. I feel like, so many times in our life, that's just the metaphor that you use. But it's like you have to. It can be easy to just be on the bus, or just feel like I'm on someone else is driving my car, and then you can feel like it can feel like, well, because of X thing that happened to me, or X situation or whatever, that I'm not in control of my decisions and I'm not in control of my life. But if you can take the scary plunge to actually living your life with a bit more intention and ask yourself those scary questions, then the rewards are boundless on the other side of it.
I think the important thing to keep in mind too is like I will have like time to help influence or to be with someone, and there's going to be times when they're they're not going to be with me, or they're even going to be getting bad advice, or they're going to be having experiences that maybe aren't perfect. But that I can't control. And I think of really focusing on doing the best I can do, and having agency in that to say I'm going to do the best job I can for this human. That's like an easy driver for me, when really wanting someone to do well is a easy motivating factor for me. That's easy to get up at 5 a.m. to go put the work in. Like, that is an easy thing to have drive for me. And so I try to do the best I can every day, and that's all I can do.
Amazing. Well,
I feel fulfilled. Obviously, I want to know if you had any interactions with Fernando Alonso.
Not a ton. No, the thing about life over there in Formula, like, all the teams, everybody's that comes from different cultures. Everybody's speaking different languages. It's not a super fun place. Not like if you go to like a NASCAR race, all the race teams are from the same culture. They all from the same place. So there's just this natural camaraderie and ease to it, that makes it in some ways just more fun.
Right.
So I mean and when I say that, like, have I had many interactions with these guys, like, there was a lot of those guys, everybody went their own way, you know. And I was lucky. I was with the Red Bull Junior team. I had a pack, and that's one thing that probably was advantageous for us, is between myself and the other Red Bull Junior drivers, like, we felt like we had kind of a squad, you know. And all of us young kids had this one thing in common that kind of brought us together, and that made a lot of things easier. You know, myself, Christian Klein, and Antonio Liuzzi, we're still good friends to this day. And I cherish that friendship. And so we were able to be great friends, competing at the highest level against each other in most ways. But having someone going through that same experience as you was super powerful and brought us together.
Who do you look at in the motorsport world, whether they be in F1 now or, you know, and you look at them and think, as you know, because as you've done this work and as you've analyzed this and recognize this within yourself, like, who do you look at and think, like, that guy's doing it right, that guy's got his priorities in order, that guy's got, you know, who's on that list for you?
Man, it's hard. Well, certainly I don't know. I can't speak of anybody that's in Europe or that I don't see a lot.
Yeah.
But I will give an example that I've told my girls once. You know, my girls, they play competitive soccer, and my oldest girl was asked to play on the younger team, the not as competitive team. And that team was going to go up against a really hard team, and they were probably going to lose. And my oldest was like, I don't want to play for them. We're going to get smoked. And I told her one of the things that one of our guys, Ross Chastain, has done that I've like really loved is, you know, he's one of the best cup racers in the country. You know, he made the Final Four last year in dramatic fashion.
Yeah.
He will still, as often as possible, get into a truck, which would be like racing an F3 car,
right,
in a vehicle that it's not winning. Maybe with a miracle it can win, but it's not at the same caliber as the others. But doing it with the intention to learn and trying to grow from it. To be able to do that with that many people watching, like, you have to be in a special place to do that. And so, you know, I frame that for the girls, like, look, do you think you'll be better if you got to play this extra game? Like, forget the results and forget what happens or what maybe people might think about you. Is this something that you can do that's going to make you better? And do you want to be better? And if that's yes, right, because it matters, right? Because I don't want them to play soccer because they think that they need to be great at something. But if that's something that they love and they want to be good at it, well, if that's your intention, well, is this going to help it or hurt it? And if this is going to help, then why would you not do it? Is it because what people are going to think, or is it because you might lose? Like,
right.
you know.
Damn. Having a dad for a psychologist.
I like that perspective because there's not a lot of guys you'll see in motor racing that will go get into a car it's not going to win. Right. You're going to finish top 10, top 20. It's going to be a hell of a day. To have, to be able to put yourself in that position, I think that's a pretty special place. It's a great example of something I think is someone that's doing at least that part of it really well.
So in a few years, you could just look at your girls when they're doing something questionable, and they go, "I know what's my intention," and then they'll be
what's your why? What's my why? I don't know what my why is, Dad. God,
they're gonna kill you. They're gonna kill you.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
it's a unique relationship you have with your kids because they don't want to really listen to you, and honestly, in a lot of ways, they're designed to not listen to you so they can go out in the world and find their way. It's a survival instinct. But there's ways around that. For example, I took the girls to Costa Rica this summer as I wanted something that is going to be challenging for them. Like, they don't speak English there. Life is hard. Like, that whole journey is going to create problems and stuff that we're going to have to overcome, right? Just challenge. I love that.
You threw their passports into the ocean and you took them.
You said,
well, I found, like, the place that we went, Tamarindo, is like one of the best spots in the world to learn how to surf. So our goal was like, I want to go there. I want us all to learn how to surf in my mind, right? And so I found a really good surf instructor. He's like the Scott and Josh of surfing over there. He's got like some legit like psychological strategies to help you learn, and he had the whole thing going, right? And the whole time he's there, he's talking to the girls about being grateful, and I like, hey, like, it's really hard to be scared if you're grateful, right? Like, what are you scared of? Like, he had this whole thing about mindset and this stuff, and the girls, like, they're listening, and after, like, gosh, it reminds me just like you, Dad, but like, he just, he says it in a really good way. it was great, like, because I still got it to them. I still got them what they need, but like, I can't be that person that just lectures them and then gives them all that, like, and it's on them. I want them to pursue what they want, and be someone here to support them and to hopefully just ask them good questions.
Yeah. It sucks when, like, I tell my girlfriend something and then she doesn't listen, and then her friend tells them the exact same thing, and then she's like, I just heard this amazing piece of it. I was like, that's what I've been telling you to. God damn it. So, anyway. It's unrelated.
That's life,
into
man.
therapies. No, that's there's actually some psychological term for that specifically, which is escaping me now. But
have you heard of nominative determinism?
I have not.
Nominative determinism is the hypothesis that people tend to gravitate towards areas of work that fit their names. Have you heard of this theory?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I understand a lot of cognitive biases. But that one's not one that I have explored yet.
Wow. It was coined by some academics after a Daniel Snowman published a book about snow, and a Platt and Wee published a urology paper. People were like, "Wait a minute, there are people with names that there's like a slight correlation." And Freud, Jung wrote that. About Freud. Freud means joy, and I think German or something, some other language. And it was like, German. Maybe there's some sort of bias that's playing on people with their names and what they end up doing.
Yeah, it's endless, and it's cool. We don't really know yet, like we don't know exactly how all this is working in the brain and all that. But it's really it's like an endless exploration. It's so amazing. I love it very much.
There was a chief judge in England. His name was Judge. Anyway, just something to think about.
Hey, the speed thing worked really good in racing, but I can tell you that wasn't very fun in high school when guys were like running past me on the track. Well, they're not so speed, huh? I got the last laugh.
And then you were like, "It's my fucking sneakers, bro. It's the sneakers. It's the equipment."
I don't have the pumps. I gotta get the pumps. The ones with the pumps on them.
I wanted those so bad.
Well, yeah. This is felt like a psychology, just absolute deep dive. I
have a hard time not diving deep.
That's all Brian wants to do. And
no, anytime,
whenever anything comes up, Brian's like, well, that has to do with your trauma. And I'm like, okay.
I'm like, well, Matt, the house you were raised in informs everything.
Gosh.
And what my inner child is telling me right now is...
That's right. You got to write letters to your little inner child. Dear little overachiever Matt.
Scott,
Dear
you're so fucking lucky
Matt.
that you didn't get into that you didn't hear about your inner child or your trauma today. You got out. Real.
Oh, I got tons. The thing is, like, I think it's on you to label what that is.
Right.
Like, what trauma is to you is so individual. If you wanna tell yourself that story, you can. But I think you can also choose.
Well, what do you not subscribe to? Like, is that too like a? There are people, right, high achieving people that don't subscribe to like. They ignore their traumas, right? They don't let that define them. Or they don't. They sort of.
Man, I think. Look, there's. I think there's people have hard times. I think. Whether it's in their own way or if it's through some sort of trauma, but I think there is a difference. Just. Knowing people have gone through similar traumatic things that I went through as a kid, that, it affected them differently, and they probably gave that more, a different space inside their mind to live. But I think it's an incredibly fascinating area, and I would love to learn more about that, because I think everybody has some traumas. As a kid, and the severity of that and the level of that is, I think in large part what you decide you want to label that as, like.
Right. Well, it's Well, not to drag this out even more, but like it was so fascinating. I don't know if you watched the Max miniseries. They did, like, there was this Dutch miniseries on Max Verstappen, and he just was like, they asked him how his parents getting divorced affected him. And how he went to live with his dad, and how he, mortgaged his time with his mom to go live with his dad to, go karting. And he was just like, it didn't affect me at all. It's like, how can you? It's so crazy to me that for you to just say that your parents getting divorced and you living with your dad full time to pursue karting didn't affect you at all. But I mean,
that's a very revealing sentence.
Yeah.
That's like, when they teach you as an actor, like what you read, when you read a play or you read a script, you write down everything you say about yourself and everything that other people say about you. And sometimes those things are wildly different. So like in a movie, it's and because your own opinion of yourself, it's, that's the most revealing thing that Max could say. That's the most potent thing that Max could say. Whether he's aware of it or not is a whole other thing. Or who knows what that actually prescribes. Like, no one's in a position to say like how it affected his life, but there's absolutely the laws of physics, emotional physics, say that there's no way that it didn't.
I don't know how can you. Yeah, I guess it's also like you gotta take it in context too of where you're getting that information. Like, is that really what he feels? I don't know. It's hard to be. It's hard to do. I'll say this: it's really hard to be honest, with that platform.
Right.
Totally. Right. But
like, are you saying what is really what, like, it's hard. Like, that's what honestly I think a lot of what I really enjoy about what I'm doing now is like I don't have to put anything. I don't have to paint any like picture or cover anything. And I can be so authentic and honest with what I'm doing and saying at all times that is like a freedom that I really, really love. That's probably harder to do when you have that much exposure to what you're doing.
All right, let me ask you. All right, let's assume that that's what he's saying is true. You're right that he might, in a private room say, of course it affected me. But this is something I think about all the time, right? With guys like Schumacher or guys like Max, who, from an outsider's perspective, seem very intense, right? Who seem very locked in. Is it possible to be that successful, right? To be that high achieving? Guys like Jordan, right? And happy and balanced and like be able to like, can you be the happy Scott Speed and step on necks? You know what I mean?
And you better be doing what you love, because to do it at the Kobe or Michael level, what that requires, you better love it. And so if you really love what you're doing, then yeah, you're going to be happy because you love it. But that has to be that you can't fake that, right? Because eventually you're going to run into a Kobe or a Michael in your field. Right. Good luck, right? Because that level of energy that's getting put in is unbelievable.
But we talk about balance, right? It's like Tom Brady. It's like he doesn't. It seems like an addict,
right? He keeps retiring and then unretiring, and
then he's losing Giselle. He's like letting Giselle Bundchen go, and it's like, what's going? I don't know. It just seems like
something that we talk about.
Simplistic. It maybe seems too simplistic that it's like very hard to be great and happy. I mean, that's that just seems like these things are sort of at odds. I mean, that's why I feel like it seems like Max kind of wants to get out, because to be great feels like it's kind of maybe consuming him a little bit. Like he's always talks about like, of it. I this isn't, I can't do that. Like it doesn't seem like he's having fun, right? The way he's.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know Max really well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Of course. No. Let us speculate. I get that. I understand your position. But yeah. All right. We'll let you go.
Well, yeah, I think why Matt brings that up is that that's something that we've discussed, the psychological, like what it takes to be great and whether there's what sacrifices are made to access those highest levels of achievement. They talk about like Senna was, really miserable by the end because he was the burden of success. That there's, that can that can sour. And that sometimes it feels like it's not necessarily just for the love of the game, like that there's the ego is involved in like dominating and beating the shit out of other people.
Or let's bring up like who are the two best guys that do it in their 40s, right, or in their late 30s. They don't have kids, right? They say that kids adds like a tenth or two,
right?
Yeah. I think in some ways. Because, for me, definitely, like I was more risk adverse after kids because my kids were the most important thing in my life, easily, without question. As soon as those puppies popped out, game changer, biggest life change for me. And so, I can see that, when you're no longer, or when you're even second guessing. I mean, for me, certainly, for example, like before kids, I maybe would have gone, post NASCAR racing to try IndyCar, but to post kids, running an IndyCar in an oval, 0% chance. Not even close. Not even a consideration.
Interesting.
So it changes something.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we could talk for.
Sorry, we're gonna let you go. I just have
gonna let you go, but I mean, it's this is the thing. This is the subject that is the most interesting to Matt and I. I think I think beforehand, that's what Drive to Survive kind of did, was put this psychological magnifying glass, sometimes a little bit too much, so certain things look bigger than they are. But
it's a TV show, man.
But
it's a TV show. It's cultivating.
No. But I think it's an interesting. That's like, you watch the Max Verstappen talk. You watch his own documentary. I mean, you're hearing stories about his childhood, and you can do enough research. You understand enough about how he grew up and kind of the everything that was in place that made him into the dominant force that he is in Formula One today. And it's a fascinating. It's deeply psychologically fascinating. His dad being Schumacher's number 2, not having a successful F1 career, putting so much of all that energy into Max, with all of his issues his personal issues, the divorce, all this kind of stuff. Max being kind of bred for this thing, it being fun, it turning into this job and all of that, and turning and Joss is still there every day. He's still at the track for every single race. Lewis firing his dad. We just did a deep dive on Lewis. It's fascinating stuff. It's fascinating stuff. So I was excited that
it's pretty the Oedipal, with drivers and their dads is crazy.
But it seemed like your dad, and we can, and we know we keep saying we're going to let you go, but it seemed like your dad, what I've heard is that he was not as you got to perform, he wasn't down your throat, in terms of your production and all that, right?
No, I was really fortunate. I think that he was inherently really supportive in a good way. I always felt my parents were proud of me no matter what, and anything I wanted to try or go, I felt supported, and that was a really great feeling. But yeah, look, how I was as a human and my whole model of thinking was all from my family and from mostly my dad, from being at the go-kart track, watching him race, and then racing ourselves, together with my brother, going to the races every weekend. I developed so much of my thought process from that, which, a lot of that was really good. That got me really far, obviously. So gosh, obviously a really lucky kid to have had that environment to grow up in.
Well,
amazing.
This is becoming traumatic for you, so we're really sorry about that.
I love what you guys are doing. I think it's super cool.
Thank you.
It's a unique one. I love the really random, off the wall thoughts and curiosities.
That's what we do, man. Off the wall thoughts and curiosities.
Well,
be a new red flag.
In my mind, it seems very focused in all that sense. So
yes, totally. Well, thank you so much for being on the pod. We start the pod by saying "Was up, Vankas," which is a Gunther Steiner shout out from the first episode of Drive to Survive. So we end with a goodbye, Vankas. Could you honor us with it as someone who is good friends with the man? You live in the same neighborhood as the man. Could you offer us a goodbye, Vankas?
Goodbye, Vankas.
Yes, goodbye, Vankas.
Goodbye, Vankas.